Around 1718, settlers from Spain built a mission called San Antonio de Valero. The mission was named after Saint Anthony de Padua and was located on the banks of the San Antonio River. A military brigade was also established in San Antonio de Béchar, which would later become the focal point of San Fernando de Béchar, which would then be renamed San Antonio. The establishment of San Antonio de Valero was responsible for the religious conversion of many Native Americans by missionaries for up to 70 years until 1793, when the secularization of the 5 San Antonio missions by Spanish authorities ensued the distribution of land among residents. Starting in the early 19th century, Spanish troops were stationed in an abandoned chapel of where this mission was originally established. As it was located amongst a thicket of cottonwood trees, the soldiers dubbed the fort El Alamo, after the Spanish word for cottonwood and the soldiers' hometown of Alamo de Parras. Military troops, first Spanish, then rebel, and then Mexican, occupied the Alamo during and after Mexico's war for independence from Spain in the early 1820s. In the summer of 1821, Stephen F. Austin arrived in San Antonio along with some 300 families that the Spanish government had allowed to settle in Texas. This migration of U.S. citizens to Texas increased over the decades and sparked a revolutionary movement that would erupt into the armed conflict by the mid-1830s that we now know as the Battle of the Alamo. In December 1835, in the early stages of Texas's war for independence from Mexico, a group of Texas volunteers, led by George Collinsworth and Benjamin Milham, overwhelmed the Mexican garrison at the Alamo and captured the fort. By mid-February 1836, Colonel James Bowie and Lieutenant Colonel William B. Travis had taken command of Texan forces in San Antonio. Though Sam Houston, the newly appointed commander-in-chief of the Texas forces, argued that San Antonio should be abandoned due to insufficient troop numbers, the Alamo's defenders, led by Bowie and Travis, dug in nonetheless, prepared to defend the fort to the last man. These defenders, who despite later reinforcements never numbered more than 200, included the legendary Davy Crockett, a former congressman from Tennessee who had arrived in early February. On February 23rd, a Mexican force comprising somewhere between 1,800 and 6,000 men were commanded by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna and began a siege of the fort. The Texans held out for 13 days, but on the morning of March 6th, Mexican forces broke through a breach in the outer wall of the courtyard and overpowered them. Santa Anna ordered his men to take no prisoners, and only a small handful of the Texans were spared. One of these was Susanna Dickinson, the wife of Captain Almaron Dickinson, who was also killed. Santa Anna sent them to Houston's camp in Gonzales with a warning that a similar fate awaited the rest of the Texans if they continued their revolt. The legacy of the Alamo. From March to May, Mexican forces once again occupied the Alamo. For the Texans, the Battle of the Alamo became a symbol of heroic resistance and a rallying cry in their struggle for independence. On April 21st, 1836, Sam Houston and some 800 Texans defeated Santa Anna's Mexican force of 1,500 men at San Jacinto, which is near the site of present-day Houston. They shouted, "Remember the Alamo," as they attacked. The victory ensured the success of Texan independence. Santa Anna, who had been taken prisoner, came to terms with Houston to end the war. In May, Mexican troops in San Antonio were ordered to withdraw and to demolish the Alamo's fortifications as they went. In 1883, the state of Texas purchased the Alamo, later acquiring property rights to all the surrounding grounds. The Daughters of the Republic of Texas, a women's organization including descendants of the earliest Texan residents, has managed the Alamo since 1905. Today, more than 2.5 million people a year visit the Alamo. It is quite an influential and historical landmark and should be visited by many more people to come.